What's up, guys? We're back with another Build Beauties, and today I have the champion of South Kai, Mr. Brandon Biggers. Say hello, Brandon.
Hello, world. It's nice being upon this pedestal finally. But yeah, we're here. We did it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course, Brandon's been a repeat guest on Build Beauties with me, but I had to, of course, get him for this winning list. He went undefeated at South Kai, and of course, he is now. Sorry, what card are you getting to create now?
It is a Namekian card.
Oh, perfect. So there you go. The guy playing Namekian gets to make the Namekian card. That's right. I'm saying that, and
Yeah.
I should know better. But anyway, but yeah. So you played Empowered Brohan. Not like a super high count on allies, but I think we have 7 allies here. You got 4 Dragon Balls. Not a full set like an Enlightened probably would be, and you kind of
Yep.
go into the new Super 4, Mystic 3, which is pretty standard, and of course the Gohan Unlocked. And for any of you guys that check out the beginner builds, you might know why he builds runs this way. But Brandon, why don't you go through the level? Why did you pick all these levels here? What was the thought process behind running the allies and empowered?
So I've been running Empowered Gohan since set release, and I think it pushes I don't know. It's a lot less reliant on non-styled cards than Piccolo was, and it has its strengths, but it didn't have like the explosive burst potential of Piccolo. And then after Swiftguard was nerfed, I kind of started to consider the idea of how can the stack kind of add more consistency. And so I kind of just said, I mean, okay, let's try Brohan in it because I know that you can solidify a lot of your matchups just with hero allies in general. And so I went right into Brohan and decided I'd be running Leaping Kick with Gohan 2 and jumping up to Mystic 3, which is easily a top 3, level 3 in the game. It gives the deck tremendous consistency. And then Super 4 for the +2 life mod and the removal, which Namekian really lacks. So my thought process was that my allies would give me some consistency, but I wouldn't rely wholly on them. I wanted my deck to be able to function without the allies, and I think it does. The allies just sort of give it that push over the top in a lot of matchups that it needs. And I asked myself, okay, if I get Unleashed down, Gohan 2 is not the worst place to be. Um, Basically, my entire deck's accessible, and I can search pretty much whatever I need between the level 2 and level 3. And then level 4 is just big damage and banishing. So um, that was my rationale behind the stack. I do think Super 4 is Gohan's best four for most decks, um, but Namekian specifically for that removal. So
Yeah,
that was my thought process.
that's very fair. Um, we'll I think, just graze over the allies for the most part. I think this is pretty standard. Of course, you're going to see most Gohans running Chi-Chi, Piccolo, Icarus, Super Shenron. I mean, most ally decks in general are going to run this card. With Icarus
Definitely.
out, it's just extra protection. Icarus has been eroded at this point to where he only protects human, or sorry, yeah, Earthling trait allies, which every one of
Yep.
your allies, other than Super Shenron, is actually Earthling trait. So
And Piccolo.
oh, sorry, and Piccolo. My incorrect. My correction there. But so already kind of like the double protection going on. Of course, that was really frustrating for a lot of people way back when. Um, Bulma, um, Yajirobe, Krillin, just all doing a lot of tech work. I know you wrote in your report a lot about Bulma. What would you
Bom-
say? What would you say to all the allies was your MVP ally if you had to pick one here?
um, yeah, probably Bulma. I mean, Bulma was really, really strong. She took a lot of my opponent's options throughout the day. Super Shenron was actually extremely strong too, because there were a lot of times that I was able to confident burst for him and rejuve an ally, and then get the same confident burst with Mystic 3, and then confident burst the ally that had been
Mm-hmm.
banished. Yajirobe did a ton of work for me in the Vegeta matchups. Krillin obviously helped me a ton in finals, but I mean, they're all there for a reason.
Yeah,
But Bulma's definitely, I don't know, she's such a high ceiling ally because she can just get rid of whatever is going to hurt you the most.
yeah,
So
very fair. Well, we'll move on to the block lineup, and we got the basic standard layout of Namekian. At this point, you're going to always see three hybrid, three buffer, three parry. You're running flinch only at two, and you're running a single copy of Last Resort. Now, how did you feel
yes.
about your block lineup for the tournament?
Um, I felt like it went really well. I'm cheating on blocks a little bit just because I have Chi Chi and Piccolo. The two flinch were fine. I really never felt like I needed a third one. Empowered doesn't have a ton of targeted rejuve effects. And so, basically your only options for getting flinch are rejuvenating it at discard, it happening to be at the top of your pile or hitting it with hybrid.
Yeah,
If you have both in pile, Gohan 3, you can rejuve one. I did actually rejuve flinch a couple of times with Super Shenron, which was hilarious because people would crit an ally other than Super Shenron, and then I would rejuve that ally and a flinch,
oh, gross.
and get a different ally out of my pile, which was strong all day. I was on two last resort previously, but I needed to make room for wall breaker,
Mm,
and so that one last resort was one of my cuts. But I feel like one was all I really needed throughout the day. It's basically just that bonus if I get to four, and the ability to cycle hybrids on three kind of lets you feel safer with this block lineup. I feel like.
yeah, totally fair. Of course, the one of time. Moving on to the events with the one time, you got the two sphere, three confro. I think that's perfect. I can't see any Namekian styled events really. I mean, you could make an argument overtime for the tutoring, but you already do enough tutoring with two and three. I feel like overtime was a wasted slot. You don't really need the rejuve.
It felt like win more. I did consider it, but it definitely felt like just a win more card. Like
Mm,
there was really no point in it.
that's fair. Yeah, I mean, three confrontation, especially the deck that's like kind of a mix. I think any kind of more mid, like any deck with a decent amount of planning, not a turn every turn enter aggro. I feel like a 3-0 stare down confro is like always never bad. And then of course Sphere, that Unleashed is in the meta, Time's in the meta, all sorts of things. But I feel
Yep.
getting onto the attack lineup, Time isn't as much of an issue, um, maybe for this deck as it is for others. So
Yeah, and confrontation was, I mean, it's so you abuse it really, really well and empowered. Because you can set up your discard pile pretty easily by cycling hybrids, get a confrontation on the bottom, and just kind of, there's a lot of consistency there.
hand knowledge of return is never bad. So
Right?
Of course, you run just four Dragon Balls. I know that these are just leaping kick targets, but you chose these specifically for their effects versus the draw. Um,
Yes.
I think I've already answered
Uh,
any question I could really pose there, but
no, yeah. I mean, six
um,
six is to smooth out the physical matchup. If I feel like I'm in danger, six can help me out there. Four, I mean, is for Goku. Like, let's be honest, Goku and other orange decks. Two is also for Goku. And then seven, I mean, it's just Namek 7. Like, if you see it, you kind of leap for joy in a lot of cases, especially late game. So
mm,
there were some games where I ended up playing a ball or two. Um, it does interfere with aggressive burst and scattershot. So it's not always an ideal play, but there are times where a ball two will save your life. So that's, I mean, that's the rationale behind those four.
very true. Moving into the attack lineup, we have five physical attacks, three leaping kick, and two wall breaker. I know wall breaker was a last minute add for you after testing. How did wall breaker pay off for you in the format,
Oh,
South Kai?
it was so good. I It single handedly won me a game against Rampage and Gohan. Um, I stuck it on both oppressive Vegetas at one point or another. It did work. They pretty much got it off almost immediately. But the oppressive Vegetas, I mean, Ram Gohan has stayed on the whole game because I had Piccolo and Chi Chi live, and he just couldn't push any damage to me the whole game. So Wallbreaker did a lot of work, and I honestly recommend everybody running at least two Wallbreaker, just in general, but
Yeah.
especially in Namekian because Namekian's anger hate is not as strong as some of their styles.
And of course, three leaping kick. Again, you run Gohan and locked. This is pretty much your target almost every time. I feel like.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh,
there have been a couple games. I had a game against the Sentient Krillin in testing where I searched Maxwell first on two, just to have it live and in the pile when I then leaping kicked from 2 to 3 and was able to just recycle the same Maxwell all game to help with that angry matchup.
yeah.
This was before I added Wallbreaker also.
That's fair.
So,
That is fair.
so a couple people question why I run 3 leaping kick instead of 2. But it's just because I need that consistency.
Yeah.
If I, especially in the empowered Piccolo matchup, I used a leaping kick for endurance. And after he saw that leaping kick from the damage from his first special beam cannon, his call with his second special beam cannon was leaping kick. And so I was very thankful that I had that third leaping kick in there,
Yeah.
because it then just immediately entered and searched it with 2 and made sure that I could get my way to 3.
Yeah. Especially being your only way to really access three in this deck list. I don't. You might be able to anger up. You might slime a little anger potentially. There
Mm-hmm.
is the two anger on the mastery, of course, and on the power of it. But really, there's no anger gain in the deck practically at all. So
Yeah, you have Wild Blast and Aggressive Burst, which help. But yeah, I mean it's difficult to get to 3 without leaping kick, but not impossible.
yeah,
I've slime angered up, you know,
a level
to
before.
multiple levels. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally fair. Uh, I think the real fun in the deck, and really where empowered, this is where like a lot of empowered lists are going to start to like look very similar. I mean, obviously there's some choices difference, but the energy tax, I think I was saying this to you before, but we did, me and a few others did a set review of Super when it came out, and one of the things we mentioned is that Namekian has a lot of these focused energy attacks, and they also have a lot of these multi-use energy attacks as well, and that's very much on display here. So, of course, moving into the first energy attack, we have Namekian Hamburst. Can only be stopped by an energy combat. This is actually better than focused.
Yeah.
In this game, the way that we're focused is worded and defined in Fancy versus Score. But
Yep.
of course, it has a hit draw. It does cost 3 stages, but just another combat extender. Uh,
And I think it really hits its ceiling with Gohan, more so than Piccolo, because Gohan, if you have multiple copies of an energy in your deck, you can set up that bottom draw really easily. Um, or you can, put a hybrid in your hand, rejuve a hybrid if you're needing to be in a defensive combat for any reason. Um, so Gohan adds a lot of consistency to hand bursts, because you might not always have the hybrid in your hand if you're Piccolo. And I don't know. I think he makes that card hit its ceiling.
Definitely. I think that's a great point to add. Uh, you do have 3 assists to Kamehameha. This just makes sense. You're saying MP.
Yeah,
Um,
I like free damage.
3 confident burst. Yeah. What are your
That's the
thoughts?
card that everybody wanted to get banned. After my matches, Axel actually called Joey over and was like, "Why is this not banish after use?" Because I think I used the same confident burst on him, 3 times in a combat because I played one from my hand, mysticked it back to my hand and rejuved one, and then drew another one with hand burst. Um, and he was oppressive Vegeta, and he actually did a pretty decent job dealing with my allies. But I mean, you can't deal with allies and run stage beats when your opponent's gaining 60 stages.
Yeah.
That's it's crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, and Joey's answer was it was a lack of foresight because it was a set 2 card. So but it's still around and it's still doing stuff that everybody hates. So
Yeah. I really feel like this card is what enables Namekian Ally Gohan to exist competitively. I feel like
100%.
I don't think Namekian Gohan Ally would be, well, definitely not as good. I don't know if it'd be even competitive without that card. What do you think on that comment?
I think it would still be competitive. Um, Confident Burst is borderline unfair, um, especially when you can get multiple uses out of it with Mystic 3. And yeah, I would use it to bait blocks and then like throw something bigger and then get it back in my hand with Mystic 3. Like there's just a lot of
Yeah.
um, it's a must block attack. If you don't block that attack, bad things are happening to you.
Yeah.
And so um, and I feel like that's one of the strengths of this deck is that there are many must block attacks in the deck. Well, I mean, you got to block hand burst, you got to block confident burst. You probably don't want 12 life cards from a wild blast hitting you.
Yes, to
Um,
move on to the next tech, Wild Blast. Wow, this card is wild. Uh,
it's a
a
wild blast, in
a
fact.
card that can do 10 life cards, and it's never bad. That can't be
Mm-mm,
bad, right? It can't be bad, and it's focused.
never
What the
focused.
fuck?
Yeah, that's the real strength of the card. Because you can push 10 life cards in a time combat and gain an anger. This is the real reason that I am more comfortable with Super 4 than Mystic 4 is because that attack is always live. You can open with it to beta block, and you don't have to strategically plan around making it your last card in your hand. And so
Hmm.
if you have multiples, it's not bad either because you can just throw them both for 12 life and feel good about yourself. So yeah,
Hmm.
I love Wild Blast. It's pretty fun. Should have been a Saiyan card in my opinion, but
Oh, RIP. You know, Defiant is one set of support away from being an excellent, excellent. Like the master itself is good.
it
It
is.
just needs the pool. Just needs a pool
It
for it.
is. It is.
It's
Yeah.
just like mimicry. It just needs a pool,
It does.
or did need a
Yep.
pool rather. um, sorry here. We're gonna move on. You have a couple multi. I'm just actually gonna jump around a little bit, but I'm gonna take Namekian Aggressive Burst and Namekian Scatter Shot.
Yes.
Those cards feel pretty. I mean, Aggressive Burst very stable for Empowered. I see everybody running Empowered running this card. It is a double use tag, like you said. There, the balls do get in the way of this card. Same with Scatter Shot. But how did you feel about Scatter Shot? I haven't seen people outside of Piccolo running this card.
I love Scattershot. Mostly because I am always a big fan of attacks that I can use more than once. Like Remain is like I don't know. I love Remain. So aggressive burst became the three of because of the endurance. And I mean the fact that it can't be modified is usually bad for you, but it ends up being pretty good when people do stuff like play hiding drill or an MP that has a natural negative mod.
Gohan.
Plus, like a double use card that I mean, if they've seen your deck and they know that you have cards that you can throw that get you two allies or hit for 12 life, they're probably going to let aggressive burst hit, and in that case, it's two angers for you. Um, so it does a lot of things, and then scattershot. I've always liked just because it can be modded and it's two uses. So it came in clutch. It came in really handy. I actually, in my final combat against Joey, I had ball four in play and an aggressive burst in hand, and my bottom card was Scattershot. So I actually drew Scattershot to discard aggressive burst because Scattershot's live if you control one or fewer. And aggressive burst is if you control any balls at all. But I think people looked at both of these attacks when they were released and said they were bad. And I don't know, like I was always like, there's gonna come a day when people don't want to run balls in
Balls
their
of
Namekian
Namekian.
decks, and these are pretty strong. So, but I really like um, both double attacks in my deck. So I cut one of the scatter shots. That was the other card that I cut for Wallbreaker.
Hmm.
So
fair enough. Of course, you have two resourceful shot. I think this card ends up making it in like most Namekian decks. Some knowledge decks won't run this card, but it's just like having a crit access is never bad.
It's a staple in Namekian, in my opinion. So
Uh,
it makes it.
totally fair. Of course, three Maxwell is like your only, I guess, aggressive burst. Assisted Kamehameha, if it hits, it's probably going to crit unless it gets modified. But
Salvo.
oh
Yeah,
yes, true.
Salvo is the other one.
And then
Yeah.
Salva's in there, which we. But the Maxwell at three makes sense to me. You just
Yep.
talked about looping it in the Ascension matchup, on top of like having Wallbreaker to make up for that. You know,
Plus it's an energy for 7 base and empowered. So I mean that's it's pretty strong.
did you ever consider controlled energy burst?
I did not.
Being that it's an energy
Um,
attack, lowers anger immediate, then on hit, stop him. It's got the dashing punch effect.
yeah, I just like so Mystic 3 doesn't mod it, and he can't get it out of your pile.
I'm talking about over like a Wallbreaker, for example.
Uh, I don't know, man. Wallbreaker's like automatic. Like that's one of the things that I like about it is that it auto attaches and controlled energy burst has to hit. I mean, it's a consideration. I
Yeah,
honestly forget that card exists like 90% of the time.
I do too. Wallbreaker, it's hard to compete with Wallbreaker just being like, okay, you have to have very specific answers for Wallbreaker, whereas like controlling energy burst, like, oh, you lowered my anger too. Well, I'm gonna block and gain anger back, and now I'm gonna level, with a
Yep.
two anger card or something or whatever. So,
I do
um,
hate getting hit with controlled anger burst. Anger, yeah, controlled,
controlled
whatever it's
energy
called.
burst. Yeah,
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
always feel very silly when it hits me. But
yeah,
again, you're already talking about a deck that has a lot of high value hit effects. So like, are you gonna block the
that's
confident?
true.
It's like deblock the confident burst that I can research with my level three. Oh, look around! I turn around and I smack you with a controlled anger burst or controlled energy burst. So
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worth a consideration
mm,
because there are a lot of high value hit effects.
yeah, just a thought. Of course, one straining assault and one
Yeah,
OPA.
thanks, Tommy.
Straining assault, like getting the limit one was really interesting.
I mean, I fail to understand why straining assault is limit one and confident burst isn't, but you know, it is what it is, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, this is. I didn't think straining assault was ever needed to be made when confident burst existed, and then it's like,
Well,
I
Namekian didn't have a way to drain stages
the
to
yeah.
use attack allies,
If you were
and
trying to
that's
if you're trying to do like aggro ally like old school Gohan from like set
yeah,
six, running like Premier 2 to +2 everything, and you're running like Erasing Blast, which is a really cool card. Really, really
yeah,
cool card, but like,
it is.
when are you gonna ever run it? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I
or
considered both Erasing Blast and Door Destruction for this deck, and then
yeah,
Salvo just made it an over because it's just strictly better.
yeah,
So,
that's the problem. This card's just needed like a little bit more to be viable, I think, at this point, especially at this point. Like every card needs to have a lot of immediate value.
mm-hmm.
And then of course the
Thanks.
OP at one.
Yep.
But two Salvo. So Salvo made it in here, and I was curious like how you felt about Salvo. I hear people that run Salvo that are Namekian players love Salvo.
Salvo is amazing. Immediate lower anger too. And my deck, as previously discussed, really needed that. The crit on hit is very very strong. I never ran into a situation where it didn't have stages for it because of the ally synergy that I run, and it's an 8 base life card attack, and it has 2 endurance. So there's just a lot of value on that card, and yeah, I mean it's really easy to love as an Namekian player. So
So you mentioned the two cards you cut. You cut the Last Resort and Scatter Shot for two
yep,
Wallbreaker. Did you ever
yep.
consider going to three Salvo?
I didn't want 3 just because I was scared of the 5 stage cost. Because for me, it's always going to be 5 stages.
Yeah.
Um, so that kept me from running 3. But I think at 2, like the endurance, the damage, and the lower anger too is very strong.
Hmm. Oh, fair enough. My final thoughts, kind of going along the lineup, is you didn't run Backlash,
Yes,
and you didn't run Namekian's Sidekick. I'm assuming because you can't modify it with the because you're paying so many stages, you're probably not gonna have AT for it, and it's just kind of a win more maybe.
that's kind of how I felt about it. I thought about Sidekick. It's actually something Wayne mentioned to me. Um, after the tournament, he's like, "Hey, why aren't you running Sidekick?" And I don't really have a reason other than I don't feel like it's going to push as much damage as a lot of my other cards. And yeah, I mean that's really the long and short of it.
That's fair.
I am trading like extending a billion combats in this version of Empowered. So I think Sidekick I'd definitely include in those Empowered lists that want, they're running Ascension and
If you
Swift Guard and just want that big combat.
if you weren't running allies, I would be more inclined to like be like, yeah, it should definitely be in there because
Yeah.
allies, it's like, oh, I get an ally crit. Okay, Sidekick's dead.
Yep. Yep.
So
And the allies are taking up a lot of my slots that I might use for other things, but I think they provide so much value,
yeah,
especially with Confident Burst and Gohan to the rescue, that they're certainly worth the include. So
yeah, you got to make a compromise somewhere.
you
So,
do,
and
you
I'm
do, and I think that people were not expecting Grohan,
no,
because it has not been on the radar for a while. But it offers like a tremendous degree of consistency. I think once Ox King got frozen, a lot of people were scared off of the deck. But I just sort of was like, I want to run mods anyway, so I don't really care. So let's just get some blocks and have Yajirobe for Vegeta and have Krillin for Goku and see what happens.
yeah,
It's obviously really pleased with the results. So
and of course no backlash. You just don't necessarily you don't want to go down to two.
yeah, yeah, that's why it was in the initial version, and I honestly ended up discarding it to Empowered every time I saw it.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I was just like, well, I don't think I need to run this card because I never use it. So,
That's yes, sir. Yeah, no, I think that's a telltale sign of when you're playing a deck. And you're like, oh, this card's good. You throw it in, you like, you if you find yourself always passing on that card, like you never want to enter a combo with that card in your hands,
yep.
or like you pitch it to whatever discard effect or whatever thing, like it's like, okay, then maybe this card doesn't deserve a spot on my deck.
And originally, I viewed it as sort of like a, well, what if you don't, get to three? Um, Backlash can provide that level of consistency. Even if they remove your allies on one, you can manage to get back to two, and then you can start the leaping kick. But honestly, if that happens to you, you're pretty much already going to lose. So it's like Backlash isn't going to save the day for you
Yeah,
in this meta where everything's fast. Um, so it just ended up not being a necessity because I have just as much likelihood of drawing another leaping kick that I can leaping kick to two, you know, in situations like that, which has happened. So, um, yeah, I just think that while this version of Empowered Gohan may not have the ceiling of some other versions, I think that it has a really, really high floor, and it's going to consistently, generate advantage and put you in good spots. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have the ability to search for what you want to, consistently loop it, versus you have to random draw into like those ascensions and swift guards. You're trying to just chain all these like hit effect attacks that just get shut down by certain decks and matchups. And then the random draws, like the random draws are random draws, versus a deck
yep.
that consistently searches what it wants and consistently thins its own deck into what it wants. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one of the things we see with a lot of the master designs, or master is a good example. Empowered master is a good example. Not necessarily exploding with a +1 on the master itself without aid from another card,
Yep.
but the consistency to have what you want, um, versus the raw advantage seems to be where the competitive meta is at this point. Its consistency is just always going to be king over just like random luck.
I agree, and I think that's why it seems like people are moving away from MPs like Draku.
Vegeto's
where
another one.
yeah, Vegeta's another one where there's just random card draws can bite you, you know. And I mean, a mastery like Empowered is really, really strong with, you know, the fact that I run allies and balls, because if I draw my allies, I can discard them and get whatever's on the bottom of my pile, and it doesn't hurt me as much as it generally would. So, I mean, my MP is searching out my dead cards, and, you know, grabbing Leaping Kick to get rid of more dead cards. And so the situations where I drew allies on defense were really rare.
Yeah.
But you know, if you do, or even if you have one in your hand on offense, like there were a couple times I had ball seven in hand, and the rest of my hand was gold. Yeah, and I would just empowered mastery and ball seven to the bottom and draw the bottom card of my discard pile.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I mean the deck looks like fire. I mean, and you obviously you killed it. I mean, you killed it. You went undefeated. Uh, that's 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 as good as a deck can do. You know, as good as a deck
yeah,
can do in
right.
a tournament is to go undefeated, and you won the whole thing. And yeah, man. I mean, congratulations. This thing just looks like a beast. Just really looks
Thanks,
like a
man.
beast. All the dead cards
Thanks,
get
man.
get tutored out of the deck, and it's just so much advantage and consistency.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to run, and I had a lot of comments during the day from people who were just like, "Whoa, man! Like this is a really cool deck," and I'm like, "Hey, thanks. You know, I appreciate that because you know, I think I sort of combined a couple of different archetypes and came up with something that's obviously pretty good." So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would definitely be scared of this deck, running into it with a lot of stuff that are just not winnable matchups for a lot of decks against this deck with the allies, and then the life card. I mean, just a lot of good stuff going on here, man.
thanks, man.
Well, I don't have any further closing comments, and I think we've done a pretty good job at hitting most of the deck. So, guys, of course, this is another episode of Build Beauties. Thank you again, Brandon, and again,
Yeah,
congratulations. I always love having you
thanks,
on.
thanks, man. Yeah, I enjoy being on,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, believe in your dreams, kids. They'll come true.
But anyway, guys, if you want to check out more, there's always going to be more Build Beauties in the playlist you can check out. Otherwise, I will try to continue covering a lot of the top cut decks that people are running at these events and trying to get their deck lists and have a breakdown. So look forward to those as well. But anyway, guys, if you also have a deck that you would like kind of featured on here, just shoot me a message and maybe we can work something out when we're both available. But
Fun. It's fun to do. I recommend it.
absolutely. Alrighty, well, guys, take it easy. Peace.